From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And coming up today, K-State's Dorivar Ruiz-Diaz will talk about identifying and correcting sulfur deficiencies in wheat stands. He says you producers may want to address such deficient fields with a topdress sulfur application sometime this winter. Also today, K-State's Janel Koons will preview the 2020 Women Managing the Farm Conference, co-sponsored by K-State, taking place in February in Manhattan. This highly successful event will feature several speakers on assorted topics of interest, which Janel will tell us about. And later on, this week's K-State Horticulture segment, Jared Hoyle joins us to talk about dormant seeding, those bare spots in a cool season lawn. All that here on Agriculture Today.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
We're glad to have you tuned in for this Agriculture Today, and we bring by once more a crop nutrient specialist with K-State Research and Extension, Dorivar Ruiz-Diaz. Now, we are in the midst of the off-season, of course, but he's going to offer thoughts today on the importance of knowing your sulfur levels, particularly with respect to that winter wheat crop out there, for you could actually amend your fields for a sulfur deficiency. This is something that you've brought up in the past, Dorivar, but it still goes somewhat overlooked, the importance of sulfur in crop productivity, especially with respect to wheat.
Yes, Eric, and I think many of the reasons why sometimes we don't think about sulfur very much is because in many cases can be confused with nitrogen. If we're thinking about, for example, the deficiency symptoms, it can be confusing and some of the symptoms could be similar. And I think that's one of the key factors. So thinking about sulfur, that is a nutrient that can be deficient in many of our production systems today, is something that we need to pay attention to and try to identify and make sure we're really talking about either a nitrogen deficiency or a sulfur deficiency in some of those fields that we are seeing with stunted yellow characteristics, again, especially in winter wheat.
So we do want to explain how to make the distinction there. Is there any particular reason why deficiencies in sulfur have been turning up with more frequency?
Yes, the reason for that is, of course, we do have less sulfur deposition. Historically, we tend to have significant amount of sulfur deposition from the atmosphere, and that's basically is no longer available. We have to apply essentially the sulfur sources now to the crops that we grow. So that's one of the main reasons. Obviously, one of the main sources of sulfur is also organic matter. So if we are having some situations where organic matter is declining over time, or maybe we have soil erosion in some parts of the field, those are places where sulfur deficiency may start to show up. And again, going back to those deficiency symptoms and how we can identify sulfur, that's actually one of the key points that we can look at, is where in the fields are we seeing some of these deficiency symptoms. And in the case of nitrogen, we typically tend to identify issues of fertilizer applications and things like that. That tends to be typical of nitrogen deficiency. But in the case of sulfur, something that's very characteristic is that the deficiency in the field tends to be more variable. We tend to see the yellowing happening in side slopes area where we do have some erosion happening. And again, those are very typical of sulfur deficiency in the landscape that we can immediately start to identify. The other thing, too, is at the plant level is that the yellowing that we see tends to be obviously in the younger leaves. We're talking about an immobile nutrient in the plant. It is a mobile nutrient in the soil, but it is immobile in the plant, which means if you see deficiency symptoms, that yellowing will tend to be mostly in the younger leaves, as opposed to nitrogen, which is typically happening in the older leaves, is we tend to see more of the yellowing. So again, both characteristics from the landscape standpoint, and also as we get closer and looking at these plants, obviously, where are we seeing that yellowing? Those are key differences compared to nitrogen.
Now, right here in what is considered early winter, will those symptoms be evident in a wheat field?
Not necessarily, and this is something that, of course, will start to show up basically next spring as winter we start to get to green up, and later in the spring, that's where we start to see those deficiency symptoms show up. So this fall, of course, is not something we'll notice, but again, as we are thinking ahead, and especially if we do have some history of deficiency already in the past, if we are planning our top dressing fertility program, is something to keep in mind this winter and the coming spring.
So if one suspects that they will have sulfur deficiency in a field, given that past experience, they probably should test for sulfur levels before they act otherwise, correct?
Yes, and this is very important, and there are a few key points for sulfur testing that we have to keep in mind. It is not like other nutrients that, we can collect 0 to 6 or 0 to 8 inch sampling depths. We really need to have a profile, or at least as deep as we can get for some fields in terms of getting the full profile of that sulfur level. And again, this is because it's a mobile nutrient in the soil. So in the soil, we do there's mobility of this nutrient, and oftentimes we do get samples submitted and requesting sulfur, and it's only for the 0 to 6 or 0 to 8 inch. And it's very difficult to have a good idea what's happening there, especially because in some soils in the state, for example, in the eastern and southeast part of the state, we have clay layers where we can have significant accumulation of sulfur. And again, this is very important because if we're only collecting a 6-inch sampling depth, we may not be capturing that layer of clay where we may have, again, plenty of sulfur accumulated. And this is obviously going to be important as we're trying to make decisions whether or not we need to do applications. So a few key points here. Of course, the sampling depth will be important, and we need to have, again, ideally a 24-inch sampling depth. If not, again, at least 12, 18 inches, something, whatever is possible, basically, in that specific soil. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, if we are collecting that profile sample, we can also analyze for nitrogen and chloride. Those are other two nutrients that are going to be mobile in the soil, and that can be analyzed essentially at the same time when we are running sulfur tests.
So upon testing, upon confirmation of a sulfur deficiency, correcting that situation, as you say, this is an element that could be applied as part of the top dress program over the winter, but selecting the appropriate fertilizer with the appropriate sulfur content. What should one think about there? Yes,
Eric, and this is very, very important also. In the case of sulfur, the fertilizer sources that we have out there can vary quite a bit in terms of the availability, in terms of time, and really ultimately the purpose of the application. We do have some sources that are going to be more slow release, if you will, essentially have to go through a process of oxidation and basically becomes available to the crop. So that will obviously take a little bit longer time, and then we have options that are going to be immediately available. And again, that's a key point to keep in mind here, depending on what's the purpose and what crop specifically we're trying to target. Again, in the case of top dressing wheat, we want to make sure and apply something that's going to be immediately available. We're not going to have the time essentially for that oxidation to happen, and so we need basically availability immediately. And so we do have basically two main groups. We do have dry sources, and we have liquid fertilizer sources for sulfur. Typically, the liquid sources are basically all immediately available. That will typically tends to be ammonium thiosulfate. Potassium thiosulfate is another source, and this can be basically mixed with UAN, top dressing time, and is again immediately available to the crop. So these are liquid options for those doing more of a liquid application system. As a top dress time, they can easily again mix with UAN and do the application that way. Then we do have dry fertilizer sources, and here we have a little bit more of a mix of options. Some that are becoming quite popular in some parts of the state are the NP and S dry fertilizers products, and these are things like commercial products like Micro Essentials, 40 Rocks, and there are others in the market as well that essentially provide primarily phosphate, but also including some sulfur in the formulation. And again, many producers are using some of these sources primarily to provide phosphorus to winter wheat, and they may already apply enough sulfur in that kind of situation. So this is something also to keep in mind. Those that are using that type of formulation, if they are applying phosphorus with the seed, and if the fertilizer source already included some sulfur, maybe they already took care of that need at that point. And then, of course, we do have other options like ammonium sulfate. Of course, with this, we have a fair amount of nitrogen as well, so it could be a good nitrogen source. It's soluble in water, so it's going to be immediately available as well to the crop. So again, ammonium sulfate is dry ammonium sulfate is a good alternative for immediately available sulfur. And then typically the lower price and higher formulation option is going to be elemental sulfur. The key point with this is, of course, that we're going to need some time for this elemental sulfur to oxidize and basically become available to the crop. So this is a little bit more of a slow release, if you will. I know some people that will still do application to winter wheat, but maybe also intended for other crops in the rotation. So we just have to keep in mind, if we need an immediately available source, elemental sulfur may not be the best choice at this point. But again, if we're thinking other crops, for example, for next spring for corn or milo, maybe this winter is not a bad time to do this kind of application as well. But again, we do need more time for oxidation with elemental sulfur.
Well, assess your options based on the characteristics of these individual products, these fertilizer alternatives producers. But it's important to account for that sulfur level, because a lack of sulfur can lead to some yield hit in wheat, can it not?
Absolutely, and we are seeing that in many cases where we have very severe deficiencies that essentially affecting yield significantly. In some cases, we may also have some mild deficiency happening in some cases where there's no visual deficiency symptoms, but yield levels are being affected. We have to keep in mind that, again, this is considered a secondary nutrient, a nutrient that can cause significant yield penalties if we are limited in this nutrient.
Well, producers, there's a great article in the E-Update series on top dressing wheat with sulfur as part of your overall top dress program. It can be found at agronomy.ksu.edu. Dorivar, many thanks.
Thank you.
Dorivar Ruiz-Diaz, our guest. He is a crop nutrient specialist with K-State Research and Extension. And we'll return in just a few moments on this Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State Research and Extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and now for you a preview of an event that has, over the last several years, really gained tremendous momentum as an educational opportunity for an indispensable agricultural audience, women. The 2020 Women Managing the Farm Conference is about to unfold here in Manhattan. It's co-sponsored by a number of agricultural interests, K-State Research and Extension as well. With us, Janel Koons. Janel is a member of the planning committee for the conference. She also is with the K-State Global Campus. That is the educational outreach branch of the university where she works with agricultural and veterinary medicine outreach. The program and its organizers have set a high standard since this was started well over a decade ago. So it's remarkable that it keeps this kind of inertia. Janel.
Yes, that's correct. We usually see around 200 women from across the state. They could be farmers, rural business owners, industry leaders, maybe even just absentee landowners. We see those as well coming to the conference.
And you've been involved for a while, so from your vantage point, what has been the allure of this conference then?
I think it's just a great experience for women in various aspects of agriculture to come together and network. We do see a lot of networking opportunities. We'll have farm wives who weren't raised on a farm or anything, and they can meet there and they can really identify with each other about where they're coming from and that they don't have any agriculture background, and just be able to have that support system at the conference. So we'll see that, again, with if it's an absentee landowner or industry women, they can just come together and share their expertise and support one another.
But it can be anybody who's aligned with agriculture in whatever capacity then. And it's impressive that not only do you have new attendees every year, but you have quite a collection of return participants, don't you?
Yes. We've been having the conference, like you said, since 2005, and we have quite a few attendees that come back year after year. They're really engaged in the sessions. Some of them even down the road start presenting at some of our breakout sessions. We have about 30 breakout sessions with presenters from ag industry, from education, from research and extension, just various backgrounds that come and help educate our women in agriculture.
And we won't go through all 30 of those breakout sessions right here. Folks can go to the website and see that full listing if they'd like to.
And we are still working on those breakout sessions. On the website, it'll be updated weekly with new upcoming breakout sessions. But we do have the keynote speakers identified.
We do have those in hand and know what those topics will be. We want to run through those. Well, before we talk about the general session, there is this pre-conference workshop that was started a few years back as part of the conference. What is the intent there, Janel?
Well, we like for the women, if they have to travel or want to come in a day early to get a little bit further, more in-depth education. These are usually about 4-hour sessions. One of those is the financial piece that a lot of women are doing on the farm, the bookkeeping. So QuickBooks is one of those sessions that we have, and it's very popular. We have both an introductory and an advanced QuickBooks sessions. We have educators from K-State, instructors teaching those sessions. And then we also usually try to have a little bit more fun sessions. So we're going to go do some touring of area ag businesses, and we will look at Liquid Art Winery, which is a newer winery to the area, and then also Hildebrand Farms Dairy that has been around the Junction City area for quite a while.
And that is making up the pre-conference workshop session on February the 12th, prior to the actual conference on the 13th and 14th of February. Now, when you get into those general sessions, which everybody will have an opportunity to attend, you're opening up with a bit of a different twist here compared to previous conferences, Janel.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about some of our general sessions this year because we are doing something other than just, one speaker getting up on the stage and sharing their message. This year we have a dramatic presentation coming from the poet laureate of Iowa, Mary Swander, and this presentation is talking about land transition. So they're going to kind of go through different issues that they've seen farmers and landowners tackle as they've been transitioning the land, whether it's to, a neighbor or children, or even they're going to talk about what urban sprawl might look like and how you would transition the land to maybe avoid some of that. So it's a very important conversation that we're seeing a lot of our landowners facing, and we just wanted to bring that to the forefront of the conference. And we're also going to have these folks do a breakout session for us. So that'll be nice if people want to continue the conversation after they see this play, they can continue that in the breakout session.
So the performance will be a table setter for whatever conversation would be triggered from that very important topic indeed. And then you will have traditional speakers in a more normal format, if you will, but the subject matter they'll cover is no less prominent.
Yes, of course, at the top of everyone's mind is the trade issues that agriculture is facing. So we're having Chad Hart, Associate Professor of Economics from Iowa State University. He's going to come and talk about, the current state of these trade policies and agreements and outlining what it might look like in the future.
So he'll take on that critical topic. Again, Chad Hart from Iowa State. And then you'll have the Kansas native and an individual who will talk of the challenges that are often hidden within the fabric of agriculture, and that is the well-being of farm families.
Yes, we're having Lance Woodbury, who is an advisor for family-owned businesses. He's going to be joining us, and he's coordinating a panel of experts to talk about mental health and well-being and just, like you said, some of the things that are kind of under the surface and how to understand and deal in those stressful environments.
So another terrific dialogue there. And then wrapping up your keynote speaker lineup, you'll have an individual talking about communicating agriculture's story.
Yes, we often get this request from women about, a lot of them are blogging or they're community leaders or that type of thing. So they want insights of how they communicate what agriculture is to the general public. So Vance is going to give us a pretty good picture of, how to share your story and how to look at even what the activists might be saying about agriculture and how to, reformulate that into your own story and talk about that from an actual farmer's point of view.
Again, that presented by Vance Crowe, who is a communications consultant. You have a loaded program here, do you not, Janelle? That's very fair to say.
Yes, it's going to be a very engaging program. I've noticed when these speakers are up there and they're talking, it's completely quiet, and you can just see how at the edge of their seat everybody is, and they're very engaged, and there's lots of conversations going on in the hallways afterwards, and it's a very exciting program to have.
And there are many more features we can't get into today, but exhibits, displays, so forth, all part of this conference. It is set once again for February the 13th and the 14th. That would be a Thursday and Friday. And the venue is the Manhattan Conference Center within the Hilton Garden Inn complex, downtown Manhattan. As far as participating then, Janelle, what need folks do?
Folks can go ahead and register online. It's available out there. They can find out more information about the conference. There's also scholarships available. If, the conference fee is a bit of a hindrance, those are available out there. The cost for the conference is $150 until January 17th, and then it goes up to $175. And the website to register is womenmanagingthefarm.com. And they can also call in to register at 785-532-2560.
So there are a couple of avenues to register. The website, womenmanagingthefarm.com. To repeat the phone number as well, 785-532-2560. The entire proceedings agenda, list of speakers, descriptives of same, all of that can be found at the website as well. And you're looking forward to another exceptional gathering, Janelle, you and your coordinators of the program.
Yep, we're very excited as we always are, and can't wait to see it all come together.
And it's coming together very rapidly now, with the finishing touches being put on the Women Managing the Farm Conference. Good luck with it, and we'll see you downtown on the 13th and 14th of February. Janelle, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
She's Janel Koons. Janelle is once again part of the planning committee for this conference. She also works in the K-State Global Campus program here at the university. Again, several agricultural entities chip in to support this conference, and K-State Research and Extension is among those supporters. Set for Thursday and Friday, 13th and 14th of February in Manhattan. WomenManagingTheFarm.com is the website to go to check this out and to pre-register. You're listening to Agriculture Today. After this break, we'll be back with today's agricultural news headlines. Also, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update, and the weekly horticultural segment for you. All of that's still to come here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today, broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University. Eric Atkinson with you, and now today's agricultural news headlines. These courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the USDA says that the adverse weather conditions this year that have continued recently are enough to have the agency extend the sign-up for the 2019 Market Facilitation Program and the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. MFP2 sign-up was to have ended this past Friday, and the Dairy Margin Coverage enrollment for 2020 was to have ended this Friday. Here's more from the USDA's Stephanie Hoyle.
USDA is extending the sign-up deadlines for two important programs.
We're allowing sign-up for both the dairy margin coverage and the market facilitation programs to continue through the 20th of December.
That was Undersecretary Bill Northey, who says the sign-ups should be completed before Christmas.
We wanted to make sure that all producers had a chance to sign up for both programs. It has been a crazy year.
One reason it's been so crazy for farmers, especially in the Corn Belt, is severe wet and cold weather that has complicated a delayed harvest.
We still have some producers in the field trying to finish their harvest. Then with multiple sign-ups going on, we want to make sure that everybody's aware and gets a chance.
For more information on both the Dairy Margin Coverage Program and or the Market Facilitation Program, please visit your local Farm Service Agency office. This is Stephanie Hoyle for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
And again, enrollment for both will now be open through a week from Friday, December the 20th. Just over 1/4 of licensed dairy operations, 7,200 farms, have enrolled in the DMC for the 2020 calendar year as of December the 9th. By comparison, 82% of licensed operations, 23,000 in all, signed up for the program for 2019. Under the first two of the three possible tranches of MFP payments, FSA has paid nearly $10.5 billion in MFP payments to producers. The top 5 states earning those payments including Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Texas, and Kansas. House lawmakers got a briefing yesterday on the state of the farm economy. With a report on that, the USDA's Gary Crawford.
From the perspective of farm lenders, what's the financial situation of the farm sector?
I would say that weather has amplified an already tenuous ag situation.
Banks are restructuring loans with real estate. The bad weather has reduced real estate values locally in some markets, and that makes it difficult to restructure and inject working capital.
Farmers are becoming more financially stressed, and farm credit loan portfolios are beginning to show it.
Ag portfolios are deteriorating
because of the stress.
That's what House Ag Subcommittee members heard Wednesday from a panel of ag lenders. The CEO of Heartland Tri-State Bank in Kansas, Shane Haynes, gave some dramatic numbers of what's happened to farm incomes in the last 6 years.
The median gross farm income in 2012 was $189,000, was $28,600 in 2018.
An 85% drop. Lenders said things would be worse this year if not for government trade payments, crop insurance, and higher limits on the amounts farmers can borrow from USDA's Farm Service Agency. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Now, to help producers deal with financial and other stressors, Farm Credit, the American Farm Bureau Federation, and the National Farmers Union announced yesterday a partnership to train people who work with producers on a regular basis to be able to recognize the signs of stress and to offer help. This partnership will use a program based on a farm stress program developed by Michigan State University Extension and the USDA's Farm Service Agency. It will provide a combination of online and in-person training designed specifically for individuals who interact with producers. It'll teach skills to understand the sources of stress, learn the warning signs of stress, identifying effective communication strategies, reducing the stigma related to mental health concerns, and connect farmers and ranchers with appropriate mental health and other resources. The training is set to begin in the coming weeks, funded by a grant from Farm Credit. And the House late last evening passed the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, passing legislation that had strong backing from most agricultural groups, but was opposed by the American Farm Bureau Federation. The bill will ease immigration for agricultural workers, won the support of more than 300 farm groups, and the United Farm Workers, the National Milk Producers Federation, praised the bill as an opportunity to alleviate some of the labor pressures currently facing dairy producers. Coming your way now on Agriculture Today, this week's edition of the Kansas Soybean Update. Here's Greg Akagi.
Steve Swaffer, Executive Director of the No-Till on the Plains, is joining us. And Steve, we're not too far away from the annual No-Till on the Plains Winter Conference coming up in the month of January.
That's right, Greg. We're really looking forward to our 24th conference here in Wichita on January 28th and 29th at the Hyatt Regency Hotel and Century 2 Convention Center.
You have activities on both of those days, but want to make sure that people know on January 27th, you also have some pre-conference activities.
We have 2 all-day workshops on the 27th. One is the fundamentals of soil health for somebody who's just getting started employing some of these practices that benefit the soil, and the other one is an advanced symposium on soil health that's really going to focus on plant nutritional needs during the growing season and then fostering your underground biology to help that above ground growth as well. So both of those are all day on the 27th and can be registered for along with the winter conference.
What are some of the highlights of the winter conference taking place on the 28th and 29th of January?
Greg, we're really excited about our speaker lineup this year. We have some of the best experts that we've had in a long time. Steve Groff from Pennsylvania is somebody that's really an experienced producer and advisor on cover crops, but he's also dipping his toe into the world of hemp production, and with that being a new opportunity in Kansas, we thought it was a really great opportunity to bring Steve in. We have John Kempf, who really focuses on plant nutritional needs and foliar application of nutrients during the growing season. From Kansas, we have Lucinda Stunkel, who's from Washington County, and we also have Justin Knopf, who's from Saline County around gypsum. We really do try to provide opportunities for the entire spectrum of folks who are looking at employing practices that are going to benefit the soils, and we are really excited about that opportunity for any level of experience this year.
There is also an early bird deadline if people want to get in on that. What's that early bird deadline, and what's the best way for them to register?
We have our early bird registration price clear through December 31st. The price will go up slightly right after the beginning of the year, and you can register on our website at www.notill.org.
Steve, as always, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, and we thank the Kansas Soybean Commission for their support of our conference this year.
That is Steve Swaffer, Executive Director of No-Till on the Plains, who joins us on the Kansas Soybean Update. It's brought to you by the Kansas Soybean Commission.
Thanks, Greg. We'll return shortly on this Agriculture Today. Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions. Coming your way next on Agriculture Today, our weekly installment on horticultural topics. And we're into that part of the year where things are rather slow out there in lawn and garden. But here's one thing that you homeowners might contemplate anyway. If you have a bare spot or two in your home lawn, dormant seeding of turfgrass. For this, of course, we brought by Jared Hoyle, turfgrass specialist with K-State Research and Extension. Normally, we don't get too terribly cranked up about seeding anything at this point of the season, but Jared, you think there might be opportunity here for some folks out there?
That's correct. We typically recommend seeding our cool season lawns in the fall and September when the ambient temperatures are decreasing, soil temperatures are high. It's just the perfect environment for germination, quick germination, and then you get it good and established before wintertime. But I know as time goes on, we may miss those dates. We may had some failed seedings due to a lot of different issues, whether it be rain, irrigation, or just lack of time. But But there is an option that's been done in the past and looked into. It's called dormant seeding, where if you do have some bare areas in your lawn, you can go out, spread that seed, a couple various methods, and then that way in the springtime, as the temperatures warm up, you've got that seed already planted into your soil, and so as soon as the environment's right, it starts to germinate and growing.
Now, this is more of a repair job than a full renovation of a lawn at this point of the season, right?
That is correct. So with any time you're dealing with extreme temperatures and seeding, you have the risk of, seed mortality or that seed dying or something happening to it mechanically prior to the ability of it soaking up water and the temperatures being right to germinate. So it has been done on larger scales in certain situations where there's maybe a lack of irrigation, the only time of year someone can get out there and do it. But for home lawns, this is a good idea for small areas that may have just need repairing or were thin. The dog may have tore up. That way it's a minimal expense, but then you get the benefit of it come the springtime.
Now, the key, not surprisingly, is seed to soil contact. You must achieve that to make this work.
Yes, that's correct. So with any type of seeding turf, seed to soil contact is the number one issue that we try to address. But luckily, even though it is cold, we can use Mother Nature a little bit to our advantage. There's a couple different methods. During the winter, we do have frequent snowfall. You can use that to help push the seed to the soil surface and get in there. A good 1 to 2 inch, you can go out, you can broadcast your seed and let that snow move that seed down into the soil as it melts. Then that way it'll get right in that soil surface and protect it from any of the environment through the rest of the wintertime.
But are there other approaches as well if, in fact, timely snow is not in the offing?
Yep. So with the wintertime, the extreme temperatures with Kansas of lows, and currently we're experiencing some highs in the 50s, but we're down in the upper 30s. We do get freezing at night. You can use that freeze thaw of your soil surface to help work that seed in as well. You can spread the seed. If you know it's going to freeze and thaw, it just keeps expanding and shrinking the soil, and so that way it just works that seed into it. So it doesn't have to snow, but that will really help get good seed to soil contact. And then the last one is just our common recommended methods for planting turf. If your soil isn't frozen and it's not completely dry, but it's not saturated, just like the same recommendations if we were seeding in the fall, you can go out there with an aerifier, verticutter, and try and get that seed down into the soil just as commonly as we would in the fall with traditional seedings.
And in fact, would it not be important to prepare the soil anyway, regardless of method? So maybe the aeration step would be a sensible approach?
Yes, I completely agree, especially if we're trying to focus on small areas. It's easy and not too backbreaking labor to just rake just a small area prior to maybe that snow and broadcasting the seed and getting it down. But understand that that's not going to come up in 7 to 14 days, as right. Commonly it would in the fall. That it will stay bare, and then come springtime, as the temperatures warm up, it will germinate and hopefully establish on its own.
And because it would get a late start compared to something that was seeded, say, back in September, you have some cautions to offer about herbicide usage on that area that you did dormant seed.
That is correct. So as the temperatures warm up in the springtime, you're going to get the germination, and any time when you have new seedlings, they're more sensitive to any herbicide applications. If it's warm enough for that seed to germinate, it's warm enough for weeds to germinate too. So weeds are a common issue and a common problem. There are a couple of different ways to go about it. There is some products out there that do not inhibit the germination of tall fescue, but will inhibit the germination of crabgrass, so to say, but is short-lived. That product contains an active ingredient called Siduron. But then if you don't have that, just a good common recommendation is wait for that turf to mature, get healthy. You may have some weeds in it, and then you go out and with maybe a post to clean up your crabgrass or some of the other weeds once the turf is healthy and been mowed a couple times. And then you may put your pre-emerge for your summer weeds through the rest of the year. Just be cautious with the pre-emerge in the springtime if you did dormant seed. If you're not using that special one, Siduron, that it will inhibit the germination of those tall fescue or bluegrass seeds that you seeded in December or February, as well as that crabgrass. So you want to make sure that it got good and established prior to applying those pre-emerge herbicides.
Read the label. Probably fits here very nicely, doesn't it?
Yes.
And just as a last thought, as far as leaf litter that may still be out there in these areas, would it be worth one's while to go ahead and mulch those leaves yet this late?
Yes, that's correct. We've been battling leaf fall with throughout the entire year. This last cold snap that we had and the high winds really got the rest of them off the trees. And so with whatever is left, it's just as easy just to mulch them up if you can, instead of worrying about picking them up. If you have a lot, then it may be worthy of getting some of them out of there and hauling them off, mulching them, maybe use them in a compost pile elsewhere on the property, and then mulching what remains. It's perfectly fine to do that. It helps build, soil health, and it reduces the amount of labor. It's easier to mulch some leaves than it is to rake them in piles and haul them off as well.
Once more, though, if you have those open spots in your cool season lawn, you'd like to get a jump on plugging those, so to say, before spring, you can seed that lawn in those areas through a dormant seeding process. And there's an article that outlines this in further detail in the recent horticultural newsletter out of K-State. Check that out. It's online. As always, we appreciate the word. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you.
Jared Hoyle. He's a turfgrass specialist with K-State Research and Extension, and he's been our guest on this week's K-State Horticulture segment. That's our time for today. Thanks to you for listening in. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.